So before we get started today, I wanted to take a minute to introduce you to our speaker today. So Ryan Anderson is the director of Q2S, which is part of Manufacturing Works member Fenatech. In this role, she's been working with manufacturers to get the most out of their ERP investment. Prior to working with Fenatech, Ryan served for 2 years as ERP specialist at a local startup. As both a user and advocate for the customer, Ryan has spent years facilitating the transition from ERP implementation to ERP maintenance, all while building long-term partnerships. To recognize her dedication to the customer support, in 2016, Ryan was nicknamed the Customer Whisperer in a trade publication article recognizing outstanding women in manufacturing. Ryan has an undergraduate degree in mathematics and an MBA from Kent State. The Q2S ERP system has been developed and supported through the Fenatech headquarters here in Aurora, Ohio, and their Luxembourg offices. This program today is part of our technology initiative geared at helping companies be strategic about using new technologies to solve production challenges and better serve their customers. We are very appreciative to our strategic event partners, Skoda Minotti and Sikich, as well as the Cleveland Foundation for supporting this work. Without further ado, I'd like to hand it off to Ryan and get it started. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that introduction. And we'll get started. So this is my introduction slide, which was just covered very well. So we'll skip that. Basically, what we're doing today is I identified that there are many articles about how to select or implement an ERP, but I found limited discussion about making sure that you need to invest in a new software or if it's just a need for process improvement. So we want to explore that today and make sure that if you choose to make an investment in an ERP or upgrade an ERP that you already have, you're doing it for the right reasons. This webinar is focused on manufacturing and distribution companies currently running either old, disjoint, or no systems, and not sure if it's time to upgrade, shop around, or just standardize internally to support your growth. So a common question I get is, how much should we be spending on technology? It's recommended that small to mid-sized manufacturing businesses spend 1.95% of their annual revenue on IT each year. This encompasses if you have on-staff IT or outsourced IT, hardware, software, maintenance contracts, everything. What you'll see in the figure next to that is how the IT budget is across different sectors, and you'll notice that the manufacturing and construction sectors are at the lowest. I don't know if that's because it's just not been as well implemented over time, or if that's really just what it needs to be up and running. So today's goal is to discuss key indicators that it's time to reevaluate your systems and processes to support growth or the sale of your business. There's this common saying, garbage in, garbage out. Any software system can only perform to the best of the data being put in. So a lot of this discussion today is about making sure that you aren't assuming just buying an ERP will fix all your problems. If you don't know what's going on in the shop floor, you don't know how to manage that, you're going to run into issues trying to implement the ERP. Now, sometimes that's helpful because when you do implement the ERP, it forces you to reevaluate all your systems at that time as well. So today we want to identify which pain points can be solved within the software and which with just simple process changes. Identify when the pain points are enough to warrant investment in your software, and discuss options for when the ROI makes sense. So there's a lot of terminology related to software systems. And before we dig into whether a manufacturer needs one, I just want to do a 2-minute overview of some of the terminology to make sure we're all on the same page there. So this is a slide of a typical ERP. It would encompass remote sales, office, scheduling, inventory, production, shipping, and accounting. Some ERPs also handle HR and payroll or integrate to other systems for that. Off to the right, you'll see a list of additional terms. So CRM is for resource, it's your Salesforce team. CPQ is a product configurator for configure, price, quote. So this would be if you're able to transition from a SKU-based system to answering questions to build up a SKU. E-commerce sites. WMS is warehouse management systems, so that's being able to scan material back and forth. Analytics, capacity planning, barcoding in the shop floor and for inventory. CMMS is for managing your machinery, preventative maintenance type things. Logistics, and of course, accounting functions. Additionally, within the production space, you'll hear the term MES or MOM. So an MES is a manufacturing execution system. It's really a deep dive into production where you get into the scanning and machine level manufacturing and that type of thing. Several manufacturing focused ERPs encompass some of the components of an MES. And then a MOM is the operations management. So that digs into like HMI level integration, historians, things like that. If you want to learn more about these topics, I would Google the 4 levels of automation pyramid, and you'll get some research on that. Another topic is the on-prem versus in the cloud. So on-prem infrastructure as a service means that it's still the same software that was on-premise, but it's being hosted remotely. And software as a service means it's going to be all web-based. And I would just be careful to make sure that if you're going that route, you have a very good IT and network infrastructure, especially if you're going to incorporate it into the shop floor. Make sure you think through how you're going to handle that if the network goes down. Industry 4.0 and the digital factory are topics that I'm not going to go into detail today. I want to talk more just about in general ERP. We could cover that in its own presentation for sure. But they do go hand in hand with these concepts, so I do want to recognize that. As well as the concept of the paperless factory. You know, if you're getting into ERP with production level software, you want to make sure you're seeing whether or not this will be paperless for you, limit the paper, extra paper, because it all adds up. At this time, I'd like to take a quick poll to understand where you're at in this process of evaluating. And will you let me know when they're done? Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you for sharing that information. I'll try and tailor this feedback based on that. So it sounds like none of you have the perfect solution comprehensive ERP, which I would assume for not being here. Okay. So moving on, we'll start talking through what points of evaluation. It's really what keeps you awake at night. So the first thing is evaluating your constraints. What is limiting you from your growth? Is it lack of resources, your product offerings, or your production runtime, or a combination of all 3? So when we're talking about resources, that's staffing. Are you having a high turnover? It takes a long time to train somebody, or is it just not worth that effort? Machine throughput would be the production runtime. So if you have limitations based on machinery and you can remove that constraint by adding more machinery, that would be a constraint for you. And then as far as product offerings, it's just making sure you have systems in place to be innovative and offer new items to your customers. ways to get them engaged. Next is evaluate your standards. And this comes from how are they being created, how are they being learned, and are they being monitored? My recommendation when it comes to standards is if the ownership or the office creates those standards, they're less likely to be implemented and used regularly. If you are able to engage anybody out in the shop floor to create those standards, it will help get them created faster. It will also allow you to see what they're thinking they're supposed to be doing. And it'll give them ownership so they might use it. As far as how to monitor those standards, that's when in the area where you would want to start considering an MES or a ERP to start tracking quality. Which leads into evaluating your quality. Now, depending on if you are in what industry you're in, quality may be, it absolutely has to be 100%, or you might be dealing with a lot of returns or internal, rework. So everybody probably has an idea of their quality, but do you actually have the data to support these assumptions? Are your customers really happy? Are your products really making the standards that your salespeople are saying? And if you think they are, this may not be an issue. If you're not sure, it might make sense to start trying to do some level of data analysis to determine what your issues are. Oh, I have a second poll. Okay, so by far the issue is constraints with this group. So I will try and tailor the rest of the presentation towards that. Okay, so the 5 signs, we're going to get into that now. The first sign is salesperson pain points. How can you improve your sales process? So you want to evaluate your sales process. Are your salespeople making good margins? And can the sales cycle be shortened? What percentage of quotes are being converted to orders? All of these questions help evaluate if there's anywhere you can improve the sales process for your customers. And there are some simple fixes to some of these problems. How do you make sure your projected margins are good? Provide history or standard estimates to the salesperson. Evaluate the frequency, how frequently their sales are matching their margins. And if you're a smaller manufacturer, you can do this manually. And you don't necessarily have to do it on every job, but being able to actually tell the salesperson if the margins they're thinking they're getting is real will help in the future. A common sign of this is that your projects are profitable, but your actual revenue is low. How can you shorten the quote cycle? Make sure you're not over-engineering at the quoting phase, especially if the percentage of quotes to turn to orders are not very high. And price sheets being complicated is another way. If a salesperson can't almost immediately give a quote, think through, is there any way that you can speed that process along? Manufacturing is very complex. I'm not trying to oversimplify it. Engineering is involved in quoting things like machinery and custom jobs. So how can you limit engineering effort on quotes? I'd say if your win ratio is below 50%, one thing you might want to consider is giving them a general quote with a variance. Say it'll be this price plus or minus 20%. Let us know if you want us to continue. Throwing something like that at somebody to get a gauge can really help eliminate the people that aren't pre-qualified. Customer change requests, how to improve the customer's experience and keep production efficient. What's the impact of the salesperson, the CSR, production teams, and margins when you get a change order? So something to think about is if you get a 1-minute distraction equals 15 minutes of inefficiency and increased quality risks. This is information that's more related to software development, but I think it transfers to any industry. Anytime you're distracted from your job, especially if it's very focused, you could be working on a PLC or something, that distraction, you know, if you're in the middle of a step, means that you could miss something. You could forget where you were at, you skip something. Hopefully you catch that later on with quality, but again, that's rework and lost time. So removing unnecessary interruptions is very important. Give your CSR and salespeople visibility of where product is in production. Give production access to see if purchase materials have been received. Both of those kind of require an ERP or some sort of online system. And then finally, group your inventory distribution pull requests together for a standard time, such as first thing in the morning or after a lunch break. Again, that's more specific to the distribution, but I've seen where companies, as soon as they get an order, will go out to the floor and ask someone to pull it, and they're pulling them off of a work. Where if they could just group them into certain times throughout the day that they grab those things, they could still make next day, you know, mail and that type of thing, but just kind of keeping respect against everybody's time. Next, forecasting your backlog. You know, how to level out the day-to-day production to maximize resources and reduce overtime. So are you releasing each job to the floor as soon as it's ready? In that scenario, you're actually letting the production team figure out what they're going to make. And this only works as you're a small company. Once you grow, it can become chaotic. So just kind of sitting back and thinking if that's still the right process. Can you group like products together? This will increase your efficiency and quality. If they're working on the same type of thing, you know, the quality will go up. And are your manufacturing hours a little volatile? Are your teams working 6 days one day and then 14 hours the next? If you're able to standardize and pull forward to level out those production days, it'll increase your employee satisfaction and, in the end, your retention. Additionally, 6 hours of work somehow always stretches into 8 hours of work, we've noticed. So some simple fixes. Again, this might not apply in all industries within manufacturing, but if you release to the shop only what they can handle, it's going to limit the work to smaller subsets, increase focus and job satisfaction. They'll feel like they're actually getting their work done. If you let the staff see the overall backlog but not the details, again, it lets them know that there's something coming and their job is secure without having to over-inundate them with all this information. A wall of clipboards, you know, is helpful when you have 20 orders, but as you grow, is that sustainable? Probably not. So again, consider the transformation from a job to unit production. If you can do this, this is great. Now, contract manufacturing, you can't do this. But the more you can think about transitioning from working on each individual job to unit manufacturing, this will help propel your growth if you've got anything remotely repetitive that you're working through. Okay, relieve the production floor chaos. So help production succeed by limiting their interruptions. Does your workforce have adequate training? Does your workforce receive all required information to manufacture it right the first time? Or are they going into the office and asking questions? How often does a job get stopped due to missing material? And what's the process for rush jobs versus rework tasks? Some simple fixes. Only release jobs when all materials are ready. If you're a manufacturer of machinery, you might have 100 parts that you're ordering or several hundred parts. Spending an hour up front when you start the job to do an audit of the bill of materials to make sure everything's there is more efficient than having a partially completed job sitting out on the floor and then you're stuck waiting for it to come in. Again, maybe you still start the work if it's not all there, but you can be proactive about it. And schedule interruptions to be at the beginning or the end of the shift. So software solutions are really required for this one to automate the process. Next, we have quality monitoring. So I've always stuck to this. If you monitor it, it improves on its own. So what do you need to evaluate? How much of your job's margin is lost to internal rework, and how often do customers do returns, RMAs? If you don't know this, I would highly recommend you spend a month researching it and collecting some data manually to figure out, is this really a pain point for you? So some simple fixes for quality would be generating upfront work instructions, whether they're on paper or electronic, and station level notifications for special requests or key information. As far as collecting data analytics, that would get you more into the MES side. Some ERPs have these functions as well. But just keep in mind, if your real goal is quality, you might want to be thinking more of an MES than an ERP. So to summarize, the 5 signs are, you're having salesperson pain points, customer change requests are high, you're unable to forecast your backlog, your production floor is chaotic, and you're having quality issues. So if one of those 5 are impacting your business, it would be worth doing some further investigation into an ERP. And we've got our final poll here. Okay, so it looks like the biggest issue is production bottlenecks and the chaos, which both of those could be helped with software. So once you've done that evaluation, I'm going to talk through a couple of things to look for when you are evaluating software. But again, I highly recommend you don't go down this route until you figure out exactly what's going on and what your goals are. Frequently, people will contact us for an ERP, and when you ask them what their goals are, they're confused. You should know why you're trying to invest in an ERP, what your budget is, and where your return is going to be coming from. These are powerful tools, but you want to identify what's going to work for you. So again, you want to try and fix things manually whenever possible. If it's not possible, determine the cost of not fixing that bottleneck and determine how much to spend on your software. So if the bottleneck is costing you $10,000 a year, don't spend $200,000 on software. Additionally, don't get caught up in the all-in-one requirement. Everything else equal, yes, you're going to want an ERP that can put everything into one system for you. But as long as there's good integration, consider multiple systems. Large manufacturers historically have an ERP and an MES system that integrate and they communicate with each other. There's no double entry, but they're at a minimum having 2 systems. And MOM will always be a different system, and that's the manufacturing operations management. So the reason for most owners to purchase any sort of software is for the analytics. You're looking for visibility, data collection, history trending, predictions for the futures, and tools to prevent future errors. But I do recommend you don't focus just on the reports. You want to know what you want to analyze and how you want to gather that information. Reports should be easy to customize, but the effort to get the data will impact your productivity. So for example, if you want to know, how much Joe spent on a certain job versus Jim, that means you might have to have a system that can support scanning at the user level, and how many scans is that going to take to get that data? Or are you really looking at, okay, is that station with 3 or 4 guys efficient? The more data you get, the more time it's going to take to collect it. So just keep in mind what your real goals are when evaluating those types of things. So always ask the how for the analytical reports. And next is barcoding. Don't just ask if they have barcoding. You want to analyze how many scans to collect the data. What's the impact to your shop floor to collect that data? What data is available on the screen? And again, whether or not a centralized terminal or user-level device actually makes the most sense. And then listen to their recommended hardware requirements. So we frequently get requests for using a tablet to scan a barcode. And in practice, it's very clunky. Imagine you're trying to scan a QR code on your phone. You have to make it work just right to get that scan. So then take that out to the shop floor, and you're going to have some productivity issues when they're wearing, gloves and masks. So think about whether or not that really is the best solution for you, or if an old, regular point and shoot scanner makes more sense, that is inexpensive. So I'd like to take about 10 minutes to provide a quick preview of some of the things to look for in a manufacturing ERP. I will be showing this in our Q2S system, but I believe they transfer to any system you'd be looking at. And obviously, first, if there's any sort of industry standard, you want to research that ERP and then expand your search to some additional ones. There are over 500 different ERPs, and it can be overwhelming. So start with, what your competitors are using or some colleagues have used in the past, and go from there. So this is a quick preview of what Q2S looks like. So there's an orders menu, production menu, RMAs, purchasing and inventory management, accounting, projects, CRM, and more. At the order entry level, our solution actually supports both SKU-based systems and product configurator. So for example, for machining, you could actually build in your questions and answers. In this scenario, the customer had the types of machining services and the amount of cycles that were going to be needed on that machine time. And then that can be multiplied to determine their cost and sell price. In this scenario, they're building an actual product. So it's a aluminum ignet, and then they can fill in purity, whether or not it's tempered, and associate drawings. And in this scenario, it's got a combination of images and plain text. And if you switch this around, you can have different images. These are static images. We also have a drawing tool for if it's two-dimensional, like building materials manufacturing, that will dynamically draw it for you just like a CAD drawing would. So again, that's something to consider. A lot of manufacturers don't think that they can convert to a product configurator, but if you can, it's very helpful from a maintenance standpoint and expanding your capabilities. It's also easier for when you're bringing in new customer service reps. They don't have to memorize 1,000 SKUs. They can answer the questions based on what the customer requests. to filter down the list at least. Preview and order acknowledgement. Every ERP will have the order acknowledgement, packing slip, invoice, but you should take a look at those and see, are they able to be customized or are they going to fit your needs? So in ours, for example, you get to put your logo, your address information in, an overview of delivery date, and then you can actually customize the boilerplate text at the bottom on your own. You don't have to have any report capabilities to do that. And that can change based on if it's a sales order or a quote. And our system actually uses the same screen for if it's a quote versus an order, or a manufacturing only. So it's one screen to learn. And that's a good thing to find out. Additionally, you can add holds. So this is a hold for inventory shortage. When we went to acknowledge it, it said, okay, we don't have enough inventory of that material. Let me go back to, and then for this example with machinery, you can actually see what inventory is required, and it's redlined because we're out of inventory. I have never received any of these things. And you can create purchase orders for as needed material and tie it to the job. So you just would select all and hit create PO, and it'll auto create the PO for you and tie it to the order, which then ties it to everything else in the system from a production standpoint too. I would always ask what reporting tool is being used, and make sure that it's something that you can get training on. You don't want to be tied to the ERP or the reseller having to do all your reporting. It's great if you want to do that, but you should be able to get access to your data. Another item within the order entry screen is your ability to see your capacity. So we can click on the required date here and look at a dynamic capacity based on what materials are needed. And you can group capacity. So I've got like the fabrication line department, and there's 3 fab machines. And you could move material between those different machines. If you hover over, you'll find, you know, how much time's planned versus actually allocated. Can also support creating setup times for each job or line item. And events are planned or unplanned downtime on machinery, like preventative maintenance or something goes down after the fact. So having these things all integrated into your ERP when you're a manufacturer is a big deal. So just make sure that you're thinking through all those scenarios. The order management screens. So a lot of times I get asked for reports, or they want an email sent to somebody to create an action. I would recommend not that, and instead there should be management screens in which the users are regularly going into and creating these queues for them of work. When they get over inundated with emails, it's just not scalable. So for example here, I've got a list of all on hold orders, and you can find out why they're on hold. The person could double click, see what's going on. They can right click and go to order entry and see and approve those holds as needed, or perform whatever action they need. So creating reports with groupings versus an actual screen that you can use are 2 different ways of doing the same thing. It definitely takes you more towards the paperless, automated methodologies. I'm going to provide a preview of a couple of our tracking stations. So the first one I'm going to show is called Guided Visual Manufacturing, and it is meant to be visual work instructions. So we're going to scan. Imagine that I'm not typing and that I had a little scanner. On your traveler report or a label. And what you're going to see here is you actually have all of the steps to manufacture, the time that you're expecting it to take, and then the user gets to record the actual time it took. And then notes about how to manufacture it can be done here. This one supports taking quality analytics, scheduled downtimes, and unscheduled downtimes against the job, and attachments. So this is just a PDF, but you could attach a video, CAD drawings, schematics, whatever you need. Additionally, you can have added attachments at the part level, or in order entry, you could have added attachments that can be used out in the shop floor. So again, this is a shop floor screen operator being able to see what they're supposed to be working on and record the time it's taking them for these manufacturing steps. So I'm just going to do next. So 1 hour, 5 minutes, hit OK. And it'll auto progress to the next step. A second mode that we have is a true time tracking. So I have scanned this item already, and I paused it. I'm going to hit play, and now it's continuing to record the time against this unit. So in the comments section is where you could put work instructions. These options are tied to, if you actually use the product configurator, any of the questions you answer or an attribute that you might have that you want to put into the system. You can click on that. This screen is completely resizable, and you can adjust all the fonts and things as well, and hide items that you don't care about. Then if you scan it again, we're going to update the item, and it'll get removed from the queue. So it's removed from the queue. When you scan your next unit, you can come in. You can also use this factor to identify the number of employees if you've got multiple employees working on the same function. Same thing with the man hours. In the other screen is you would just multiply out your man hours. So, and these are tied to labor parts in your bill of materials. Go back into core. A few other things to look at. Make sure that you can get transaction logs, you know, if there was a price override, who did it, things like that. Every system has invoicing. We support invoicing at the order level, or you can actually invoice based on a shipping route. So if you have large amounts of material distribution that go out every day, you could build up a truck that ships and then go and hit that truck and just generate invoices for everything that's shipped. And if it was partially shipped, it'll create a partial invoice. And it can automatically go to the customer, so you can remove anybody manually printing, emailing, faxing those documents out. When it comes to purchasing, if you need to, make sure you talk through units of measure and how you actually want to sell, stock, purchase any component that you are using. Our system supports creating a purchase order, receiving it, and then generating the bill. So this allows you to separate when your quantity on hand will go up from your cost, as the invoice usually comes in a couple days later after you get the material. Obviously, you'll want to review the traveler report or see if you're going to use barcoding with labels instead of a full piece of paper. Material optimization is something we support. That gets more into the MES space, though. And being able to edit your bill of materials after they've been released to manufacturing. So you can actually come in here and build your bill of materials up, or swap parts if something needs to be swapped, and get actual bill of materials. And then Finally, consider whether or not you want to do any sort of e-commerce. If your customers already know what they're going to order and they're regular customers, it might be something to consider. They could create their own quotes. They could see their status of their jobs as they're going and things like that. So obviously there's a lot of things to consider when evaluating if you're going to upgrade an ERP or select a new one, or if it's just process-based. So that kind of covers a very, very high-level overview of some of the pain points, and hopefully I've given some pointers on how to look at things from a process standpoint first before jumping into looking for an ERP selection. At this time, I'd be glad to take any questions that you might have associated with the presentation.
Ryan, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen companies have as they go through an ERP implementation?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Here's one in the chat area. Given the large number of available vendors, why are ERP software offerings so expensive compared to QuickBooks, Quantum Jump, and Expense?
So in my opinion, QuickBooks provides a function and it's priced associated with that function. When you jump to an ERP, you are looking for a lot of more functionality and you're paying for that difference. QuickBooks does a good job for a small manufacturer, and that's a big reason why you want to make sure you're picking something that's scalable. Like Q2S is actually a combination of user and modular based, which is not common. Usually you have to pick one or the other. So we have upwards of 50 modules, plus you can pick how many users you want to help scale it to fit your business.
So another question, what is a good way to document what is currently happening on the shop floor?
Okay, sure. Before you start the evaluation process, some people will start by implementing just using Excel out on the shop floor. They might get a PC or two out there to document it, or they might just create Excel-like sheets of paper for people to fill out every day. It's kind of manually doing the processes that they would potentially do with an automated system to see what's going on. Additionally, that's more talking about, where something is out in the shop. If you're talking about the processes of like how to generate those components, we have a visual work instructions tool, but you could just as easily, to start out, give somebody Microsoft Word and ask them to just write down their instructions and take pictures with their phone. Start there and just see, how much time is it taking you to do that? And is it really helping you? Good question.
Another question for you, Ryan. If a company has a legacy system, how long should it be kept up and running after implementing a new system? And does someone need to input data into both systems for a period of time?
Sure. In our implementation process, typically we do about a month of parallel, and this depends again on the business and the risk associated with the manufacturing process. But you want to do what you're doing right now, business as usual, plus use the new system. So it is painful, it's double entry, but what it allows is out on the shop floor, people can tell you if something's missing without the risk of impacting your customers. Anytime you go to switch a new system out, you just want to be careful about that. And as far as the old system, it depends on if you're going to be keeping the information. Sometimes you have to keep that old information for warranty purposes. So you might need to keep it up and running for a period of time just for that, or discuss whether or not it makes sense to import that data into the new system.
Another question here for you. In thinking about changing over to a new system, how do you choose who should be the project manager for that new system? How would you select that person?
That is a fabulous question. Historically, smaller manufacturers think that an IT person needs to be in charge of their software implementation, and that is typically the biggest mistake. At the beginning, you're setting yourself up to fail. Somebody in the IT system does not know your business operations. The project manager should be your general manager or your operations manager. It should be somebody that understands your operation process from out in the shop floor and in the office. You do need IT support for sure, but they should be a technical support and not helping drive decisions about how your system's going to run your business. Keep in mind that, you know, when you're picking a software solution, you're allowing a system to take over some of that control that you have manually right now to drive your business. And you really want to be careful that you're setting that stuff up to be successful for your unique business. Each manufacturer is unique. If they weren't, then there wouldn't be so many, right?
Ryan, just in your experience in implementing your system at some of your customers, what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen or encountered that some people might not be thinking about?
Typically, the biggest challenge is going to be resources. If you're very busy, you want to talk about, can you do the implementation during a time where you have less, work? Is there a downtime? Additionally, sometimes people will bring on extra staff. Now, I would definitely make sure that when you're bringing on the extra staff, it's to backfill somebody else's position, not to be in charge of the ERP. If you bring in somebody who has experience implementing software but doesn't know your business, typically that's just going to create more work and overhead than if you got the people that really know your business the best making those decisions. Not that they're doing the work of configuring, but they're involved in discussions about how to set up the system and how it's going to work for you day to day. And then another big pain point, I would say, during the implementation process is not dedicating enough time to the testing in that parallel process. The biggest risk is manufacturing something wrong. So you want to make sure that your manufacturing processes are going to be done right and there's redundancies associated with it while you go live.
Are there any other questions, concerns? Oh, we have another question. What kind of support after the sale does Q2S provide?
Sure. So being the support manager for 8 years before transitioning, I'm great for answering this. We offer a maintenance contract that includes support. So it's software updates as well as we give a number of hours per month for answering questions and helping with report mods, configuration, things like that. So we have 24/7 support. We also have an emergency line with a tiered team in case of something happening. If you get into the MES space and you're running your manufacturing operations off of us and you're running 24/7, you need some sort of a support network there. And that's no additional cost or rate fee. Every customer gets that.
There is another question, That is, what about customers having access to production information? Can customers see their orders in process?
Sure. So this is our customer portal. It's meant for business-to-business e-commerce. And they can see as much information actually as you want. We actually have hidden settings for being able to see what station it's scanned at. We've only got a couple customers that really want to unveil that level of detail. But you can see if it's, this is our dashboard. You can see whether or not it's been received, if it's on hold, what the on hold reason is. In process means it's been released to production, and shipped will tell you whether it's shipped. And even if it's partially shipped, you can kind of see that information. And you can click on your orders to see more detail as well. So for this one, you can see there's a production status. You can hide that icon though. So yes, this in theory could eliminate any calls from your CSRs in the customer service department about, did you receive my order? When is it going to ship? All of those types of things can be alleviated through this process. So they can also see quotes that they're doing. So for example, the ones with the Q prefix indicate that they're a quote. So any final questions before we end?
We will make the presentation available to all of you, and we will make Ryan's contact information available as well if you have any additional questions. We do have a few more minutes if anybody has questions. Otherwise, that is the presentation for today. Is there anything else, Ryan, that we're forgetting?
Not on my end.
Okay.
But yeah, please contact me if you want to talk further about this. I'd be glad to have a discussion one-on-one.
Please watch for our post-event survey. We will send that out along with this recording. We'd love to have your feedback. And please reach out if there's any questions or you need information on ERP systems. We hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.